is on, you can hear me. Somebody recently waved me a hand to show it's okay. It sounds all right. Welcome everyone, and please welcome our speaker, the recently elected city attorney for Seattle, and Davison here in front. And you want to stand up? And a lot of people have said they were very interested in hearing from her. So I don't want to get in the way of letting you satisfy that need. But I did want to just briefly remark that she's the first woman city attorney Seattle's ever had. And she is going to cover several topics in her presentation, and I'm not going to go into the details about her background because she'll cover that. And I'm expecting her to explain, to help people get the lay of the land, the organization and the role of the city attorney's office under the Seattle City Charter. And a lot of people are not entirely sure what the city charter is, including me, but we have a local government that has been designed by hand, if you will, by the people in the form of a mini constitution, which is known as the city charter. Then she's going to talk about what she's up to in this, I guess it's first months.
Start of the second year.
Part of the second year already. Okay, I'm losing track of my elections. Okay, but at any rate, your midterm, can I say that?
Almost.
And she's going to talk about, I think, the changes that she's made and the changes that she may be planning to make, and the relationship this has to all the issues that affect the city government, and the people who live here, including us. So with that, I'll have Ann Davison take the podium.
Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you all for having me. Is this a good volume?
Yeah.
Okay. I luckily coached my daughter in soccer, so if need be, someone can just yell "coach voice," and then I'll get a little bit louder. When I was in coaching season, I would get home and I would not have much of a voice at the end because I tend to yell the plays to the girls as they played. Where to go, so-and-so, go this way, that way, whatever. In the first couple of games in halftime, I would look to the girls and I'd say, now does anybody want me to stop yelling about, because I felt like I was yelling so loud, I get so excited. Does anybody want me to stop yelling the plays when you're playing the game? And they all sit quietly. No, we like it. I'm like, okay. So I just kept yelling, and they were super fun to coach. So I'm really thankful to be here. This is one of my most favorite things to do, is just coming out and talking with people. So I feel really lucky and thankful that I can do it now. I enjoy campaigning. Some people wonder why, but it's because I get to do things like this. So I'm really happy to not be campaigning, but still do this, because this is really the substance of why I went into public service. Is to talk with people and hear about what they care about. Is there kind of a tinny echo? Is that bothering you?
You're probably getting it.
Is it from me? Okay.
You're doing fine.
Okay. It's just me. Okay. Not to worry. I also, my first year of college at Baylor, I grew up in Texas, and my first year at Baylor I was a piano major, so maybe it's my hearing there. I quickly, although I played piano since I was the age of 6, there was someone there that was a sophomore giving a senior piano recital, And I said, well, why is there a sophomore giving a senior recital? And someone said, well, have you heard him play? And I'm like, no. So I went to the afternoon rehearsal, and I was like, wow. And they go, yeah, that's the thing. He's played for 6 years. And I thought, wow, I've played since I was 6. I don't know about this. So I switched majors after that. So anyway, I just was happy to notice your organ here and your piano here, so I know your room is used and has some music sometimes. So I am, as Roger said, the first woman to serve as your elected city attorney for the city of Seattle, and I'm really honored to do that. It wasn't set off to be a goal of mine to do that, but I am the highest legal office that we've had held by a woman and a mom, and so to me that's something to note. But I also am the mother of a son and a daughter, so I want them both to know that they have a future, that it's not just because they're one or the other, but it is that they are people. And so that to me is really an important thing to focus on. So as I said, I grew up in Texas. I have lived here in Seattle for 25 years. After I finished Baylor, I finished with a sociology undergraduate degree. I really wanted to go into crisis relief and particularly refugee work. And so I moved to Washington, D.C. to try to see if I could get work with a non-governmental organization and get overseas. I wanted to go to places where everybody else was leaving, because to me that's really where the truly most vulnerable are, because if you're physically and economically able to leave a location, you have done so. But if you are not able, you are really the ones left behind. And so that was really the place I felt was for me, was to go into those types of places. So I had set off to do that in my 20s and was in Washington, D.C. trying to figure out how to navigate things as someone who didn't have any interest in government, but needed to be able to support myself. So I ended up with a position for a U.S. House of Representative doing administrative social work. So it's called casework. So if you ever write into your representative and ask for help with Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, I was one of those people that would get your letter. Back then it was only a letter or a phone call, right? There was no email. And I would help navigate large agencies to help get some resolution and answers for you. And so I did that for a while, and that representative retired, and I decided I really want to get over to what I was going to do. So I then left and went over to Thailand and taught English in northern Thailand. And I had been there earlier in my undergraduate days and had worked at a UN refugee camp on the border of Cambodia. And so I was trying to get back to Cambodia. And they were in the midst of about to write their constitution. And so I had studied all about Cambodia and the really tragedy that had happened during the Vietnam War to Cambodia, where a lot of people had not really spoken about what had happened there, not just in the crossfire of the Vietnam War, but also internally with their own civil war that they had been undergoing. So I went to teach in Thailand and tried to see if I could figure out from over there how to stay in Southeast Asia. And I share some of these personal things with you so you can understand why my background is kind of varied before I get into the substance of the work. But my dad, who was a chemical engineer, just said, "What are you doing? You need to." And it was just one of those moments, when you think, well, I don't know, I probably need to do something a little more, traditional or something. So I just decided to give up on that. It was kind of sad for me, but I didn't know quite what else to do at the moment. So I went back to DC and landed in professional sports. So really quite the opposite of what I was intending to do. So I worked at a sports representation agency, again, needing to support myself, not necessarily looking to be in pro sports, but I think that's why I was sought after, because I wasn't there to meet people and to get to have access to professional athletes. I was just there, again, in a support role. And then because I wasn't mesmerized by somebody's being famous, I was relied upon a lot. And so when I kind of realized I wasn't East Coast pace, I decided, and I don't want to go back to Texas, so I decided it was out west. And so I came out this way, sight unseen, packed my car and drove over to Seattle in December of 1995 with an interview planned for the Seattle Supersonics. Does anybody still remember a team? We used to have here. And so I came here and I started working for the Seattle Supersonics in January of 1996. And 6 months later, we were playing the Chicago Bulls in the NBA Finals. And I don't know really anything about the game of basketball, and that's really true. I played soccer all growing up and played soccer at Baylor, and so don't know the sport of basketball, but I know the business of basketball and I know the business of sports. And so I lived on a houseboat and worked at the Sonics, and this town was beautiful and electric, and I thought, wow, I have landed in a really, really fantastic place. So it was a lot of lucky events and privilege and support that I've had to be able to make those choices in life, to do that type of a professional journey. And you'll notice that none of that said lawyer. That's because I was not a lawyer at that time. After being at the Sonics for 6 years and really realizing that as a woman that doesn't know basketball, there's not really an upward trajectory of professional development that they planned out for me. And so I was in my mid-30s, I decided, you know, maybe this really is time I get serious about what I was originally talking about doing. And so I wanted to go think about law school and maybe look at immigration law, or what could I do that could really go back to those things that I felt called towards in my 20s. So I left the Sonics before they left town and went to law school down in Willamette, down in Oregon. And so after I graduated there, I came back up here to Seattle, lived at 18th and Madison, and was a single woman and started my own practice and built up a book of business and took it to a small firm downtown, and so was practicing for a number of years. And after having my first daughter and then my son, I only have one daughter, I don't know why I said first, but had my 2 kids, and around when they were the age of 4 and 6 is when they started asking me questions about what they were observing here in the city. And honestly, that's where things really started to culminate for me, was as a mother, trying to unpack it in age-appropriate answers to answer the situations that they were observing. And they weren't even encountering it, but they were just observing it. And they observed what all the other adults do around it, right? Which is, we were seeing people that were clearly in need. They were seeing people that they weren't sure if they were asleep or alive. They looked like they were living in situations that the kids did not understand. Why is everybody else going about their business, right? And this is what a young mind was trying to process. And I'm trying to figure out how do I explain to my kids, and I realized I can't explain things, right? It was inexplicable to me at the time. And I started to liken it to that refugee camp that I had been in at the border of Cambodia, and realizing that conditions in those camps had been more humane and hygienic than what we had left a lot of people here. And it was really breaking my heart. So I started to then make myself educated. Who are these decision makers? How did we get here, right? And really just dove into local politics because it was impacting how I parented. And in addition to, clearly, people were left alongside the margins of our society, literally pushed to the edges of the road. And so that's what really was the first foray for me into understanding local politics and what was happening in situations in here. And so if you don't know, I've run for office more than this one. And so I ran in 2019. It's just never having done this before for a district council member position, and got through to the general election. And it was a really interesting, fascinating experience because I'd never done anything like that. So to educate myself through the whole process. I'll kind of fast track a little bit for you then. So then when we come to this position, and this was coming up for an election time in 2021, and I was adopted. So the whole reason why I'm also here is I was adopted. My birth mother was 19 when she had me, and my thankfully adopted parents took me in. And my birth mother was losing her battle to cancer near here. She was actually, this is part of the reason why I came this way. And my adoptive mom was in ICU down in Houston near my brother. And I was flying back and forth to both of these women as to why I'm here and why I have the capabilities I have. my adopted parents and the education and access I had to things. And nobody was running for this seat against the incumbent. And I thought, wow, doesn't anybody else see that that really is a place where you can really make some positive change for public safety and start talking about what we're doing and how we are handling that topic for our city? And nobody was running and nobody was looking to do it. And so it really was at my birth mother passed away, and it was at her deathbed. The next day was the filing deadline, and I decided with a chaplain who had just come in and didn't know me, and I said, there's this decision I'm thinking about, and it's all I can think about. And she just said, well, you know, what would your birth mother say? And I said, well, she'd say, go for it, right? And she asked me, you know, how do you feel if you don't do it? I said, sick to my stomach. So I was like, I guess we got the answer. It was not personally convenient or comfortable to do that, right? Losing her and then my adopted mother in very severe failing health. But it was absolutely the right thing to do for the city. And as a mother myself here in the city, it was the right thing to do. And so I'm really thankful when I talk about that each day I have in office. I'm really, really very thankful because I didn't do it lightly. I put my life on hold in order to do it because it was so important. I think that we have just regular people, regular everyday people involved with the running of local government. And I'm a total newcomer, have not worked in government here at all locally, and I think it's really is important because new eyes on the same problems can re-energize and give new insight. It doesn't mean that I'm smarter than anybody else. It could have been a lot of people. It just means new eyes on the same problems, right? It's really has some value. So when I talk to you about the work that I'm about to talk to you about, which is like Roger had said, what is this charter and why am I here and why am I your elected city attorney? That gives you some, maybe too much background of who I am, but that gives you a little bit of insight of how I'm here and why it's so important to me and why I chose to spend my evening to come and speak with you, because you all are also part of this city, right? You are experiencing it, and many of you may have grown up here, I don't know, or you might have lived here recently because of family and you moved here. But for whatever reason you're here in the city, and your experience in the city and your sense of safety in the city is yours and yours alone. And the sense of safety for people is subjective, and nobody else can really judge that for anybody else. It really is just a personal sense of safety. And so one of the main things that I handle that is misdemeanor crime that happens in the city of Seattle. So within my department, so I head up the law department. Each of our within our local government, we have multiple departments. You've heard of the Seattle Fire Department, Seattle Police Department. All those are departments, and they're called executive departments, which means that they are under the mayor's guide, except for the law department, which is the one that I head, which means that I represent the city, which is an entity, which is that we are a corporation, but that's a legal term for a corporation type, but we are an entity, so I represent the entity when I speak as a lawyer. And so I have a civil division that is full of lawyers and professional support staff who provide legal advice to all those departments and city council, as well as defend the city when the city is sued, and we have to take up those matters in litigation. I also can initiate litigation on behalf of the city, since I have full supervisory control of litigation. And one of the things I've done in this first year, I guess it was in the start of my second year, which I'm in now, was to start a lawsuit against Kia and Hyundai because they had failed to include basic anti-theft mechanisms in their least expensive cars. And that's the qualifier that needs to be paid attention to. They're only in their least expensive cars did they choose to omit the key fobs, the anti-theft technology. From 2011 to 2021, and they excluded that. In their more expensive models, they included it in those years. And in the start of 2022, they put it in all their models, but they have not gone back to the ones that are on the road without those, which again are their least expensive models. And that has increased motor vehicle theft. And what I have learned in going on ride-alongs with police officers and going to roll calls to understand the people who choose the occupation of police officer here in our city, stolen vehicle is an indicator of can be an indicator of a lot more dangerous circumstances. And so we are seeing lots of other crime associated with the theft of these vehicles. So I was the first in the country to initiate that lawsuit against those two car manufacturers for their contributions to the increase of motor vehicle theft here in the city of Seattle and increase of crime. And now, to date, I think it's over 15 to 20 other jurisdictions across the country. New York City, Milwaukee, I think Baltimore County, multiple locations have also joined in that lawsuit because they are also experiencing those same types of things. So that's one example of what I have done on the civil division side, which is not it has a relatable component to public safety, but it is using my litigation control of the entity to say, this is a problem that's happening here in the city. What we're seeing is a lot of teenagers are stealing them for joyrides, and they're getting dumped in the city, or they are also stolen and then used in the commission of other crimes. So really it is something that I think needs to get addressed, and so that's one of the main things. In addition to that, I have the criminal division, as I said, so I handle the misdemeanor prosecutions that happen in the city of Seattle. And just to kind of, because I don't know, do we have any lawyers in the room? Any retired lawyers in the room? I do say the joke that we're kind of a dime a dozen, but maybe we're not in here. There's not so many of us, but so just to read, so is that you have an understanding of it, because I really do like to talk about it as if nobody understands what we do sometimes, because we've made some sectors of our world complicated with a lot of laws. But there are 3 levels of crime, so misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, and felony. And so I handle the misdemeanors and the gross misdemeanors, the non-felony crimes that happen in the city of Seattle. And so I have a criminal division of prosecutors and professional support staff who handle those cases. And the way I talk about the public safety system, so people understand how the operations work, is similar to a track relay team with a baton handoff. And I use this because my daughter ran track, and when I watched her on a race, I was like, this is just really like how I should talk about it, because it's really clear. So the first leg of that track relay team is a law enforcement agency. They have to come out when someone has called, and there has to be a report. Maybe they don't come out, but they have to make a report and generate a report that then is sent over to the prosecutor's office. So either my office for misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, or the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office for felonies. But I am the second leg of that track relay team. I cannot do anything unless and until I get that baton handoff in the form of that track relay team visual, if anyone was a track runner in their other days. But once that is handed off, then it is within my responsibility. We then review it and decide whether or not it meets certain standards to make charges for misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor crimes. And that is a discretionary mode that my prosecutors review, and they may decide to file charges. So it follows the course that you might be envisioning of going before a judge or a jury and deciding about whether or not the person was guilty or innocent. It also includes, for me though, alternatives to that version, which is going to alternatives to court. And that might be a diversion program, that might be any type of alternatives that we've set up, therapeutic courts, things of that nature, where it's not going through what is traditionally called what people think of as prosecution. And so that makes up my entire criminal division there, is to do those 2 types of things. One of the main things that I started when I took office in January of 2022 was to create a first of its kind data and transparency team. There had not been very much data coming out of the city attorney's office. It kind of was a bit of a black box. It was not very known about what it was doing and collectively what was the work output of the office. And so we now have the ability to provide that visual for me so I can make better decisions and for the public. And so those are on our website. We have quarterly reports that put out exactly what we're doing and the numbers that are there so that they can be seen and understood. Council asked me to provide demographic information on suspects that were going through one of these alternatives, the diversion program I was just describing. And so we provided that, but I said that that's really just half of the incident, though, is understanding who is being accused of that criminal activity. The other half of that is who was the victim in that. And because then you get really the whole neighborhood view, the micro view of that incident that occurred. And we really can't educate ourselves about what's happening unless we also understand what happened for that victim. And so really my focus has been about recentering victims as we talk about crime, making sure that we are hearing from them, that they are able to participate in the process, that they are encouraged to participate, and we have seen that with what we have done. What I walked into, a young gentleman in the back said I walked into kind of a bit of a mess. It was a not really good situation when I walked in. I walked into a 5,000 of those referrals, 5,000 case backlog when I started last January. And so what that means is all those referrals that came over from Seattle Police Department, they were waiting here in the city attorney's office for a decision. Are they going to file charges? Are they going to divert it? Or is there not enough evidence and it should be dismissed and they send it on its way? It was just it was waiting there for any type of a decision. And that was not the right thing for victims, right? Because you can imagine then there were people that had been the victim of a crime, and now many of them had been past the statute of limitations and we couldn't do anything. Some of them were close to that time period where we could not prosecute, or the evidence was so stale it wouldn't be successful, so it was not worth our resources to pursue, and we had to dismiss a large number of cases because we had to create a prioritization about what do we do to get to the crime that's happening today. So we came up with a plan to handle just those the cases in the backlog. Those have now been processed. Those cases were just getting added to the back of the line as they were coming in. So every day there was a victim, it would go to the back of that 5,000 case line. So I stopped that last March, and we handled that separately, so we could then institute what I called a close-in-time filing policy, where we're self-imposing a goal of 5 business days, and sometimes we're on track for that, sometimes we're a little over. I think right now we're over that, and we are making sure our staff are all hired up so we can stay on that track. But the reason for that is so important because our response is, what we are controlling is the social response to that criminal activity, is through what do we do here. And so if I were to knock off this hand sanitizer off the ledge up here, it quickly falls to the ground. I'm wanting to try to close the time gap between when the criminal activity occurred and our social response to that, right? So that it becomes clear that's the response to that. Because our laws are a reflection of our values as a society, and we've agreed upon the laws through our lawmakers of what is okay and what is not okay to do as we live in close proximity of one another. And so to me, it's really important to have that closer in connection in time for that. And so we handled that backlog, and now we are in with the close-in-time filing. One of the things I also focused on, particularly in my first year, was rebuilding those public safety partnerships. There really was no working relationship with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office prior to my arrival, not on an ongoing basis, and that to me was unfathomable as a recent member of the general public. Having lived here and wondering what was going on with some of these decisions, that's an important piece. As one of your electeds and all the rest of your electeds that you have, we all should be talking. If we touch a problem and one of the other ones do, we should be talking on that. It costs us nothing to talk to one another, but it costs the public a lot if we don't talk to one another. So you really should be requiring all of us to talk to one another. And so when I started office, I was thankful that the prior King County Prosecuting Attorney Dan Sandberg was willing to start that with me. And we started it around an initiative I started, which was called the High Utilizer Initiative. From that data team, we were able to come together with the data and see that there was 118 people responsible for 2,400 of those police referrals we were getting in. That's not a lot of people to understand what's happening for them individually. That's a lot of havoc that's being encountered in lots of neighborhoods. And so through that High Utilizer Initiative, we started working closely with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office to make sure, because some of those same people that we were seeing at the misdemeanor level, they were also seeing at the felony level, right? Because those things can often go together, right? They might be one way or the other, and so it's good to have communication so we can understand what's happening for the communities and for those individuals that are engaged with repeat, frequent criminal activity. The other partnership that was non-existent was with the Seattle Police Department, and I think that's really important. I think, again, we get better results when we go in with kindness and openness, and we talk to people, and we say, we have certain expectations, you should be held to certain standards, I rely upon your work, you need to do it to that caliber, because we rely upon it when we review cases and then make our charging decisions. It has to be good, it has to be thorough, and we need it to be done like that. And it's been really important. I've gone out to every precinct for every roll call to say thank you to people who are working maybe down in West Seattle that will never answer a call if I needed it in the North End. But to show up and say thank you. Thank you for choosing to be an officer in the city of Seattle, because it's important. We do need people to do those roles. It's important. I don't hear any of my kids' friends saying they want to grow up to do that. But we do need them. We need them to do it well, and we need it to be in the reform work that we've done, but we still need them. And so that's been an important thing to do, is to rebuild that with the Seattle Police Department and with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. It's been really a big part to improve our response that we can have in improving public safety. By that High Utilizer group, the High Utilizer Initiative, we were able to show after 1 year of that there had been a reduction in police referrals, and it was a reduction of 11% over the year of reduced number of referrals. So that has been really important to show that we were able to reduce crime by doing that, because it's not that we needed more people and more money, but we needed to be more strategic and smarter in how we were using the resources we had, which meant working with other public safety partners, right? That's an important piece there. So I've been talking a long time. That's highlights of what was over my time of becoming into office. I'll give you a couple of highlights of what's going on now, and they're probably seeing some of the recent news, and then we'll have some time for questions after that. So the state legislature was tasked with coming up with a new drug possession law, and prior to 2021, our state law was that drug possession was at a felony level. Our state Supreme Court decided that the way it was written was unconstitutional. So our legislature made a temporary fix for 2 years, and temporarily during that 2-year time period, it was classified as a misdemeanor. And Seattle did not put that into its municipal code, and so it was not something that was a crime here to be enforced by the city attorney. Now, this legislative session, they concluded on April 23rd, they did not have a fix. I introduced a legislative bill with Councilmember Nelson and Peterson that was specific about public drug use, because it was prior to the special session that occurred. After we announced it, then the governor called a special session, which is hard to say at the end of the day. And then they came up with the permanent fix, which is a gross misdemeanor for drug possession and public drug use of controlled substances. So that will be in effect July 1st. So remember, I prosecute misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors that happen in the city of Seattle. But in order for me to do that, it has to be in the Seattle Municipal Code. And so there is now awaiting for council vote a bill that would adopt that state law into the Seattle Municipal Code, which would then give me the authority for us to take on those cases. Its goal, right, for me, its goal is recovery. The entire thing we're doing related to substance use disorder, and the things that I had to answer to my young kids and talk with them about, of how people may end up in states that they're in the oppression of addiction, right, which can reach all levels, all backgrounds, all economic structures. But it is particularly of grave concern when we see people and we know that people are dying from it. And I feel like we should be, with a sense of urgency, responding to those people. And we need every avenue available to help get them into treatment. And this is one of the ways that it can be. It doesn't mean to be the only way, and it doesn't mean that it's always going to be this way, but it's one of the ways, and we need to have that available so we can get people into treatment and recovery. We are losing a lot of people faster than we've ever had before. The substances on the street are so dangerous, and the longer we leave people exposed, if they are not passing away from overdose, many of them, long-term use of meth, which is directly toxic to the human brain. I talked with Dr. Rick Reese, who heads up the University of Washington's Addictions Department at the School of Medicine, to make sure I'm educated on substances, but it's directly toxic to the human brain. So the longer we leave somebody exposed to that, they are going to decompensate, and eventually they will become incompetent, and they will not be able to regain the self-sufficiency, right, where we can block it with opioids, with other medical assisted treatment. So to me, it really is a cry of urgency, because sadly, it seems like if we don't get them into treatment, many are going to die from overdose, but many of them will actually lose competency the longer they stay on meth. What I know is, as I talked with my young kids about it, I observed other children walking with the adults they're with, and the adults walk like they don't see it, right? Because you don't know what to say. And the children observe and they learn. I guess you don't do anything, you don't say anything, you act like you don't see it. And I don't think that's the generation we want to have in our future. I certainly don't want my kids to think like that you don't do anything, but you also don't know if you should do anything in the moment because it's maybe not be safe, right? If you're just a passerby. So it really is super important. So again, council will be voting on that. It's next week, and so it's very important. But the goal is treatment. Treatment and recovery is the goal. It is not to have people just go to jail. It is if there is decided to be in custody time, there needs to be treatment in the jail, which is not now, and there needs to be a full plan for reentry at the end, and that's not there at the misdemeanor level. And that to me is the complete circle. We have to have that reentry part built out, which means all of us have to be able to receive them back, right? That's the important part. If there was a custody time. If we're able to get them just right to treatment, we need to be doing that. Okay, I have talked for way longer than I thought, Roger. Maybe that's not very good. You're not supposed to give us the freedom to just speak, not a 2-minute time period. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions and go over anything else, but thank you for having me. It's really fantastic. And I heard there's some mics. Roger says, raise your hand if you have a question. And there's microphones, it looks like, on both sides of the room.
Do you need water?
I'm okay, thank you. That's very nice.
My question is, how much has the reduction in the police force and police funding affected the ability of your office to get proper reporting and prosecution of crimes?
Well, that would be hard to measure, right, what is the reduction, but it right now is looking like we are getting similar referrals to pre-pandemic times. It's starting to head in that direction. The reason why it's hard to answer is because some of what I've heard is that sometimes people in communities I'm going to, some don't want to call police, so they weren't calling them earlier, but some now think that it's no use, and so they're not calling. And so it's hard to know how much is that and how much is from the number of officers. So all I can say is I encourage people to call, and because I cannot have a data report unless and until I get that referral, and then my data starts from there. So that's the best answer I can provide. But it does, it's helpful to have more officers, obviously for further investigatory work and more serious crimes and things like that. That are outside of my areas that I don't follow and know about. But it's important to have more. Just because then we're able to do more when we haven't.
Oh, I can't.
Oh, here in the middle. I was like to say, maybe I talked too much. I got everybody's question.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question very similar to the question that was just posed. So let me pile on that by asking, because there are between 300 and 400 officers that we don't have, that people say we should, doesn't that mean that there isn't the detective capacity, the research capacity in the Seattle Police Department to pursue crimes against property and over a longer term? The kinds of crimes that require time for investigation as opposed to, let's say, a week, but might take more months. Is that a concern to you? And then the other question I would have is, there's been talk about closing down the King County Jail. Do you support that?
I don't think I have to repeat the questions because you were very good on the microphone. I think that there are, so I don't direct the police. Again, as I went through the executive departments, I don't direct the police. And so I will not know where they have numbers of people. So that will just be first and foremost. I don't know where they put people, and I don't make a note to even necessarily have that at the top of my head at the end of the day. But I think it's important that they're there. And the amount of things that we see, if we see something that doesn't have what we need, we would send it back and say we need to have more. We wouldn't be making charges if there's not a sufficient amount of evidence to do so. Is there probably some lag time? There's some lag time, because then when we are requesting additional information, there may not be the ability to go and pursue it. That's why with the Highlighter Initiative, it was important to be able to talk about the people who were causing a lot of the harm. We were able to then think about how can we best use the resources that we do have, and that means throughout the public safety system, to be responsive for that. So that is important. But I do know, like for example, on graffiti cases, it's difficult because we have to be able to show a certain amount of proof in order to be able to charge those crimes. That's a lot of damage that can go on. Sometimes, I mean, many of it actually is so much, it's so high, it's out of my area, it is in the felony area because it is so many thousands of dollars worth of damage. But again, it doesn't mean don't keep trying, right? Like if we get them, you know, we ask for the things we do need so that we can pursue them. That's important. And then your second question about the jail, I have toured the jail, and I've gone and I've thought about, you know, what is necessary. I know that for officers, when I've talked with them, the ones are saying to go and be able to have a tool for a community that is saying we need a break. Like when we've had frequent repeat criminal activity, when we talked about the Highlighter Initiative, there were some stores that had the same person going back 3, 4, 5 times in one day, committing crime and threats, if not actual assaults on employees in their place of employment. That's alarming, right? And so we needed to make sure we could handle that. If officers don't have a place where they can take someone that is closer to here, they have to drive someplace further away, and that takes them offline to go transport somebody to Snohomish County or down south. So it's important to have it strategically located where it is, I think, because of the time it takes to have them go elsewhere. Again, when I think about it, we need to be using every moment that somebody, if there does have to be a custody time, that we are improving somebody in that time period. And that means medical assisted treatment available in the jail. That means, like I said earlier, making sure there is a robust return and re-entry plan, and that is not there at the time at the misdemeanor level. That is the time when we can have that meaningful intervention, if we have that plan laid out, but it's often not laid out. So I think that we need to have it. And so it's probably nobody's desire to be, you know, that's the topic that they have to be in charge of, but we need it for society, same as with prosecution. It's not necessarily someone's favorite thing to have to do, but it needs to be done by somebody in our society so that the rest of the people can focus on what they're doing and their business and their family and getting, not worried about these decisions, right? So I think that where it's located is so important to our officers, it's particularly with the lower numbers, that we need to have it available. Okay, we have in the back.
I'm Linda. So you have talked a lot about. You have mentioned about diversion programs and the need to have adequate diversion programs, adequately staffed. Tell me how you see that now. What is the status? Tell us a little bit more about the status, the reality of diversion programs.
Okay, so another topic I will probably mention, if you've not read about, is community court, if that's been something that somebody's read about. And so an alternative that had been set up a few years ago, 2020, has a great sounding name. It's the third version of community court. And so again, with that data team that I have, that we're going through all of our data that we have, we can see how many people are going in, how long is it taking for people to graduate, and what is the number of people that are being successful in that program overall. And it's not a good use of our resources. There's such a small number of people that are actually going through it successfully. A lot of people are not showing up, and we have then prosecutor, defense counsel, and judge waiting, and it's just this constant cycle. If we're trying to get people into services, but it's taking sometimes well over a year, year and a half to actually get them that, that's not really the best way to do it. So I did withdraw after the over a year-long study of that. It was not done lightly, it was not done in a rush, so that we can go direct to diversion programs. So nonprofits that are set up to actually then focus on what is it that was something that was contributing as a root cause as to why somebody was engaged in this type of activity. What were they lacking? Is there something that we can connect somebody to services to directly and immediately, right? Again, with that close in time, making it close to the time of when that occurred. So we are actually hopefully getting them to services quicker than what was happening, and at lower cost in the process to get them there. So there was only 2 programs when I started last year. We've now built up to 5, and so that is going to start to happen, and I'm really happy about that, because my criminal chief has been a prosecutor for over 20 years, and predominantly in the therapeutic courts, and so she guides me a lot through seeing the things that actually can work as alternatives, and it really is a way that we can respond to people outside of the traditional way, as long as there's responsiveness. And then if there's not responsiveness, we can move back over, and then we can make the charges and proceed it in another way, in the more traditional way. But it was just, that one was not providing the results that we needed to for the cost that it was.
Okay, there was some.
You have worked with refugees, and I'm watching with horror what is happening in Florida with the illegal immigrants. Are illegal immigrants an issue here in Seattle for you?
No, because it's not something that we look at. We don't look at status. We are, again, just with we look at the referrals, and we look at that. There are ways in which if somebody's assisting in a crime and an investigation, that there are assistance that's that way, but that's not something that is within my day-to-day things.
The issue of drugs is so central to the whole discussion that
I can hear you.
when you say that the systems are not in place to treat people or to make sure that there's a recovery program, do you have any ability to influence that? I mean, how is that going to happen? Because that's really critical.
It is really critical, and I don't have direct control, but I certainly have influence, and that's what I intend to do, is to continue to talk about it. Again, because some of the entryway, a lot of people I've talked to that are in recovery, in fact, Tom Hansen has become a good friend of mine. He wrote American Junkie. I don't expect you to necessarily know that book, but he is now disabled from his heroin use and abuse in the 90s. Was a dealer and a user, and I just saw him Sunday, and now, so I get kind of choked up when I talk about him, but I met him just in door knocking and campaigning. And so he literally says to me, I wish someone had cared enough to make me stop before I disabled myself, right? And so to me, what I'm saying is it is not about getting people in jail. That's not the purpose. But if it is one of the methods by which we can then get somebody closer to being able to be restored and being able to into recovery, we need to do it even for them. So I will be talking, as the question was about the jail, that's the part to go and speak with and make sure that we can have that access. And then again, it is also then at the exit. I don't control anything other than the recommendations we give to the court, right, as prosecutors. In that second leg of that relay team, we give recommendations of what we think based upon the circumstances. And so we can give those recommendations, and I can then work with the next in line on that public safety circle for that. And then it's all up to the rest of us, you know, after that, to welcome somebody back.
One more, maybe.
One more? Okay, then we'll do the last one.
You started out by telling us that when you would be out walking with your children and they would see people in a distressing state, they would ask questions that you try to answer. Thank you. Thank you for being that kind of a alert and involved parent. We are very close, as you obviously know, to Freeway Park. And in our activities, we encounter people that we yearn to help. We have tried, a number of us, and the answer that we have gotten has been frustrating. They have indicated that the 988 number, which I believe has been publicized as being the number to call if you feel some person is having a mental health problem as opposed to a crime problem. And that number has not worked for us. And we have been told by the 911 people that unless the person that we have targeted is willing to say, yes, I will go to the hospital if that is important, that they will not respond to somebody lying on the sidewalk. Do you know whom you would call if you and your children encountered somebody seemingly incapable of moving from the sidewalk? Do you have a number now?
That really makes me very sad. I don't have a number, and I want one because I do go out, and I have seen a young man. This was prior to my taking office, but over at Green Lake, and emaciated, and here from North Carolina, and living in utter filth, and on I don't know what all kinds of substances, with a head wound that had maggots in his head, and would not go in for help. And I said, do you want to just, for some reason he liked talking to me, and we were going to go get bacon and pancakes. And so he agreed to get in somebody's car, the group that was out trying to help clean up. And I had to go to another appointment, and it was on the campaign part. But I heard then that he decided not to go and get out, and I regret ever having left. Not that I was doing something special, but for whatever reason there was a connection and a willingness in that moment for that young man that I think, why is he out here in that state, right? So I hear you, and the part that I control, again, is not necessarily right on point for that, but it doesn't mean I don't hear you and I don't understand, and I can't talk about it to those who do maybe have an ability to make something different. It's the first I've heard that someone has said point blank that the 988 doesn't seem to be working, so I certainly can pass that on and see. Thank you so much.
Well, if I was going to ask you to give our speaker a big hand, maybe you could try again. We're very grateful for your taking the time to come and to tell us all these important details about a subject that's pretty hard for most people to get their heads around. So I hope it's been helpful to people who want to know more. And I also wanted to put a plug in for the Spotlight on Seattle Committee, because this is exactly the sort of thing that we try to do to help inform and keep people abreast of current issues. And if you're available next Thursday, we have another program. This time we're going to talk about the rivers and floodplains of King County, hearing from Lauren Reimelt, the managing engineer in charge of that program. So I look forward to seeing some of you, and hopefully maybe all of you, back next week. Thank you.